Since the dawn of the GAA in 1884, the telling of its stories have been just as important as the sports. Through the years, heroes and matches have been immortalised, inspiring generation after generation. But some of its most important stories have also gotten lost or turned into legend. And in this series, we will explore some of the GAA's most fascinating forgotten tales, separating rumour from reality and myth from the truth that is often more amazing than the fiction. I'm Michael Foley.
And I'm Ciaran O'Hara.
So join us for Over the Bar, exploring the histories of the GAA. Welcome to Over the Bar, our ongoing trawl through the great stories of the GAA. Ciaran, we're getting pretty fundamental today, I would say now. What we're talking about today now is real, proper, cornerstone stuff.
Oh yeah. On the seventh day, God created the All Ireland Hurling Final.
That's it. Why he didn't think of it on the first day, I don't know. But hey, look, maybe he had other stuff to do. I don't know what he was at. And that is the question. When was the first All Ireland Hurling Final? And look, there's no one better to answer that particular one than the man we got on for a chat today. That's Paul Rouse, very well known professor of history at UCD and author. And you know, one of those historians that has done so much to promote the idea of sports history in particular, not just GAA history, but sports history as a legitimate, interesting form of social history. Like, he's done a huge amount to bring that idea forward over the years. But for our purposes today, he's also particularly the author of The Hurlers, which is the definitive story of the first All-Ireland Hurling Final. And it's a great old yarn, Ciaran.
It's an absolutely fabulous book. If you haven't read it, folks, go out and get yourself a copy. It will be time well spent. And yeah, as you said, these aren't just sports histories. Like, this is a social history of the time. It's a great read, and it's great to have Paul with us. Paul, we typically tend to start these episodes by asking the big question and requesting the short answer, and then you can take us into the long answer. When was the first All-Ireland Hurling Final?
So the first All-Ireland Hurling Championship started at the start of 1887, and the final was played on April Fool's Day 1888. So for a variety of reasons, the championship, which was originally meant to include 12 counties who entered in it, ended up with 5 counties actually competing on an open draw basis with no provincial championship. And it ended up being delayed because of a split within the GAA, a violent conflict between various factions, a difficulty in securing grounds and trains and teams availability, and ultimately a sense that the organisation was very much in the making. And it all came together eventually in the final. The football, by the way, was delayed even further, but the hurling was eventually played on, as I say, in April 1888 in Burr, which was also known as Parsonstown, in Kings County, which is now known as Offaly.
Yeah, not at all confusing for the modern listener at all. And we haven't even actually got on to the enormous pitch, like the 21 players or whatever. Actually, reading the Hurlers, the prologue, it kind of really captures everything, all this kind of madness together between 42 hurlers standing outside a hotel. There's 3 Fenians there. There's an IRB man. There's a veteran of the US Civil War, I think.
Yes.
And a couple of other lads described as agitators and subversives knocking about the place. But there's no marching band because they're away at some kind of like a land war issue or some kind of protest or something, right?
Yeah, there was an eviction taking place out the road. So the local pipe bands would ordinarily have marched the hurlers from the middle of Burr out to the hurling field, would ordinarily have taken place, but there was an eviction or an attempt to stop an eviction out in Clough Castle, just out the road. So all the bands were at that.
Yeah, it strikes me off like that there's a perception of the GAA, particularly when you go back to this period from their formation in 1884 up to good years afterwards. Like, there's really kind of a wrap the green flag around me feel about the whole, I suppose, reality of the GAA, if you like. But in actual fact, it's always been a very broad church, and it was a broad church back at the very beginning as well. I mean, you mentioned in the hurlers, like, that, you know, you have soldiers at this game who may or may not have been stewards. You have thousands of people coming from all over to this game, which kind of reflects the whole idea of the thing spreading like wildfire and people coming in whatever transport they can. And then the game starts, and again, you have a lot of stuff that we see now that we debate and talk about now, it's there then. There's disputes over rules, there's issues over expenses, fellas getting paid to get the train to come down or whatever. A lot of what we talk about now, Paul, is very, very prevalent at the very beginning of the GA as well.
I agree. It's kind of all there already from 1887, and we like to think of history as a kind of a progression of people and societies over centuries, where there's kind of a linear pathway of progress, as if we move to a modernity where everything is successful and better. But really what we often do is find new ways of doing the same thing. And the behaviours of people on the hurling field, on the sideline of the hurling field, after the match in the pubs of Cork, how they prepared for the game, and the meaning of the victory for those people is really striking, the similarities that were there. That's not to say there's no change, because the context in which a game plays obviously changed. So you get technological change in terms of people going in cars to games, or the manner in which the media covers games completely changed. And the fact of it is, you can sit in your front room now and watch a hurling match, whereas there were people who were at that hurling match in Bar who had never been at a hurling match before and had never seen the game before. So that's a marker of change, but it's not necessarily progress.
If we take it back, Paul, to how it all began. So I in preparation for this, I scanned through the Celtic Times, and there's very little talk about the All Ireland Hurling Championship in the papers of Michael Cusack. So where did it all come from? Who initiated this?
Okay, so the first thing to say, we'll come back to Michael Cusack and the Celtic Times in a few minutes, but you have to remember that by 1887, when he founded the Celtic Times, it's an amazing newspaper which was republished by Ennis, a local county library, and they were involved in it. It was a newspaper which survived only because a full copy of it was kept in a pub in Dublin and handed down to people who facsimilated and put it out. The full run of the paper unusually wasn't in the British Library or wasn't in the National Library of Ireland or Trinity College Library, which are copyright libraries. It was an individual kept it, and then it was republished. But Cusack, by the time he started that paper, was outside the GAA. He had been fired the previous summer, the summer of 1886. The GAA was thriving, but Cusack had managed to fall out with absolutely everybody within the organisation and had essentially been removed by all sides, not just by nationalists who wanted him gone. It was pretty much anyone he came into contact, he'd managed to fall out with. He was an extraordinary individual, without whom the GAA would not exist, and without whom the game of hurling would be markedly different. And he was exceptionally capable. So you asked the question, where did it all begin? I'll start that by saying that the two best histories of hurling that have ever been written were published within a couple of years of each other by Arthur Whalefowl and Briar O'Cochinna. He wrote in 900 words of Colscale na Hamana, O Husagama Gumila Ukeduk O'Cahar. That is to say, in the beginning of time to 1884. 900 words of Irish, 900 pages of Irish. Now, Arthur Whalefowl, he called his Come On 2,000 years of hurling in Ireland. So he restricted himself not to the beginning of time, but the 2,000 years. And they tell the story.
The editors had a word.
They had a word.
He avoided the Jurassic Championship.
Yeah. So obviously these are pre-GAA histories written in the 1980s, which chart a stick and ball game played in Ireland for as long as we have a proper historical record. So it's there in the text of the annals from 900 onwards. It's there in a stick and ball game. It's there in Brehon law. It's there in the poetry from the medieval period. It's there later in travel reports written by writers in the early modern period. And it's there in the newspapers that begin to circulate around Ireland, in particular in the 1700s. It's also in an exhibition that people can go and see in Castlebar in the Country Life Museum, where they've carbon-dated slitters that were pulled out of bogs from all over Ireland in every century from 1190 AD onwards. And the oldest hurl that they found has been carbon-dated to about the 16th century. So this is a game of stick and ball that has been played across centuries. What happened in the 19th century, though, was fundamental social and cultural change in the country. Obviously reached its peak with the famine, which saw mass emigration and mass death on a truly appalling scale, which upended social and cultural life in the country. At the same time as that was happening, hurling was still being played. So you can find records of hurling until the 1870s and early 1880s in North Tipperary, in North Kerry, in parts around Cork City, on the west coast of Donegal and the east coast of Antrim, little pockets along the Shannon in Galway. But what had happened in none of those places was that hurling hadn't taken the modern form of organisation. That is to say, there were no official clubs playing under written sets of rules given to a governing body and organising competitions on a local or national basis. But what was happening in Ireland was the sports where that revolution in play was underway between soccer and rugby and cricket were pressing all the way out into the Irish countryside. Because, of course, Ireland and Britain were two islands united in one kingdom, and Britain was the home of that sporting, or a home of that sporting revolution where these games were codified. By the 1870s, you had the presence of these games all across Ireland, and on an informal basis, you had the survival of hurling. Michael Cusack, although from Clare, born in the middle of the famine, a school teacher, he was a cricketer who had played cricket when he taught in Blackrock College School. It was a French college, then Blackrock. But he wrote that there should be a cricket club established in every parish in Ireland. He wrote that in 1882, 2 years before he founded the GAA. He was then at that stage in charge of a rugby team, just before that, in a rugby team. He had played in the first ever Leinster Senior Cup match, and he had founded a rugby team in the school and wrote and described himself as a sterling lover of the game of rugby. So how did this man, who was part of that sporting revolution, found the GAA?
Love GAA history? Then you love going deeper with Over the Bar's Cordia Club membership. For just €5 a month, you'll get exclusive member-only episodes and series, early ad-free access to the main podcast, plus detailed show notes, a newsletter, and the chance to have your questions answered. Join Michael Foley and Ciaran O'Hara as they uncover the stories, the legends, and the questions that shaped our games. Don't just listen, be part of the club. Join now at overthebar.club.
And I'm really sorry that this is such a long answer, but it's what happened was there's the context of land war and home rule agitation is important as backdrop, but there's a couple of specific things happened that were directly related to Cusack's life, which inspired him to look at the new ways of approaching sport. First of all, an exhibition of Irish-made goods happened just down from his house, which is now the Derrick Vale Hotel, which you walk by on the way to Croke Park. People will know it, it's just off Parnell Square.
Oh yeah, the Derrick Vale, of course, it was a great media hangout. It was a place where at one period of time, it was where all the journalists would go after the games. You'd meet up and you might file your copy. You go down into the bar in the basement. You see all the greats used to be there, but that's kind of gone into abeyance now over the years.
And then therefore to be avoided, of course, as well because of that, Michael, by the rest of us. The second point is in Cusack's house, the Derrick Vale Hotel, there were meetings of the Gaelic Union for the preservation and cultivation of the Irish language. Cusack was an Irish speaker who now became involved in 1881 in Aontacht McGuelga, the Gaelic Union, and that transformed his mind. And third of all, there was the publication for the first time ever of cheap, affordable editions of the Irish myths and sagas, including one of Cuchulainn an Epic, published in 1882, in which Cuchulainn displays his prowess as a hurler. We know Cusack was reading this, but he wrote about it in newspaper columns that he was writing at the time. So all of these things came together, and Cusack abandoned cricket and rugby in late 1882, and by early 1883, he was calling for the re-establishment of what he called the national game of hurling.
And then where does that come to the formation of the clubs that we see representing the counties in the first championship?
So Cusack tried in early 1883 with a club called the Dublin Hurling Club, and it didn't work. He fell out with various other people who were involved in a game called hurley, which is like a prototype of hockey based around Trinity College.
So there's a very rough description, I suppose you'd call it, by Cusack of the players who played hurley in Trinity and the other, I suppose, the prestigious secondary schools of Dublin at the time. He described them as civilized eunuchs and grown-up little boys who played hurley. So I think we can take from that it wasn't exactly the vision he was putting forward for the game of hurling, that what he wanted it to look like.
Yeah, that's Cusack in a nutshell. his abuse of people who disagree with him was spectacular. Like, for example, after the GAA was formed and it took control of Irish athletics, there was a group of rivals who were previously his friends who founded the Irish Amateur Athletic Association and said, we reject the GAA doing things. And Cusack described them as a ranting West British abortion. And he called them Orange Catholics. Like, he was ferocious in his capacity to fall out with people. And he wrote all of this publicly. So it's all on the record, which is really helpful. He didn't bother.
The lawyers must have had a field day.
Yeah, and he himself, the funny thing about it is, he actually, sorry for cutting across you, he actually sued another newspaper for defamation at the same time that he was slaughtering people all over the place. Of course, he wouldn't be alone in that. In terms of Cusack, he began to organise, and that Dublin Hurling Club didn't work, but in the autumn of 1883, himself and 3 other lads, a man called L.C. Slevin from Armagh and 2 Monaghan brothers from Clare, met on a Saturday afternoon beside the Wellington Monument in the Phoenix Park and started to hit a ball around. And they, in the Victorian version of the modern internet, which is the newspapers, they put a notice in to say they were doing this and people were welcome. And every Saturday in the autumn of 1883, more and more men came and played. And that is important that it's men. It was a profoundly male sport, profoundly male time, utterly discriminatory against women who were not considered for membership of the eventual GAA. But those men who came together in the autumn of 1883 then founded the Metropolitans Hurling Club. And the reports of their internal matches were published in the newspapers. And they were spotted by people in Killarney and East Galway who issued a challenge to Cusack to bring town his team and said, we may not have a club, or we'll go and play you on the fair green in Ballinasloe on Easter Monday 1884 for a silver cup. And the reports of that day are fantastic.
This is the day, Paul, where again, when you talk about, when things occur that Cusack doesn't agree with, he's not slow to kind of make his point up to the actual act of stopping a game and going, sorry, you're doing this all wrong.
Oh yeah.
This is what happened this particular day, wasn't it?
So it's a magnificent day. The team of Metropolitan Hurlers that is due to travel down is published in the newspapers beforehand. They travel down by train. There's bands on the train. There's supporters. They arrive into Ballinasloe station. They're met by the hurlers at Killarney. A huge crowd. They march through the town. There's music and gala and spree. They arrive there. The 2 teams line out. The ball's thrown in, and for 5 minutes, there's just this timber everywhere. The Galway team is 21 aside. You can only score goals, no points. The Galway team score a goal on their attack, and Cusack pulls the plug. He goes, "That's not how you play hurling. Clear the field, and we'll show you how to play hurling." So they give a demonstration of how they think the game has been played, and then they're cleared from the field. And the Killarney team give a demonstration of how they think it should be played. And there's a journalistic report which says, a fantastic line, no discernible difference could be seen between the 2 games. But Cusack anyway. Cusack didn't go to Galway to get a beating. So he marched his troops back to the train station and they went back to Dublin. And bonfires blazed all the way to Killarney as they brought the Silver Cup home. But in the newspapers afterwards, a writer to the Western News says, this should be the spark which, like a fire, which leads to an organisation to revive and organise the national game of hurling.
So that is an interesting thing that Cusack said about the Metropolitan Hurling Club, that it kind of, the creation of the Metropolitan Hurling Club and that whole process gave him the idea, actually, of the GAA as an organisation that could be founded. And I think as well, I think I'm right in saying that, like, around the same time, around that April period, he would have noted that the Highland Games were occurring in Scotland. So again, that idea of, I suppose, an indigenous sporting organisation promoting native games kind of floating around. You had the athletic element. He was trying to wrest back control of Irish athletics from the English Amateur Athletic Association. And, even in that, like, he brings in the superstar athlete of the period, Maurice Davin, and together they, start to begin to set up and organise the meeting in Hayes' Hotel. That becomes that I suppose spawns the GAA. Davin writes the rules. And even within that, when Davin writes the rules of hurling, there is some issues like around this. Well, okay, this is the version of hurling that we're publishing and we're going to attempt to put into use. But there are people going, oh, wait a minute now, our way is much better. For example, the people in Clymer who obviously have already seen Cusack come down and show them the way he wants them to hurl. But they're going, no. Our way is far better. Like, our goals are bigger. We've no sidelines, lads. Our pitches are bigger. So it's kind of like, again, even like now, you know, even at that point, there's people looking back to an other version of hurling, an older version of hurling, going, this is definitely the way to go.
So they found the GAA, and they get Mike Morris Davin, the leading athlete in the country, to write the rules for athletics, for a game which they invented called Gaelic football, and for them to write proper rules for people to learn. And you're right, Clymer came back and said, no. The Clymer lads simply declined to play. They said that the game that you wish to construct is as effeminate as lawn tennis, and it's not for us. There were other people didn't put it quite like that, but they didn't come in either. Like as late as 1906 in Donegal, they were playing cross-country hurling. There was pockets of hurling as well, but they were playing their own game across the mountains. So again, there's just because an organisation is set up doesn't mean everybody needs to row in. And you're right, we should talk at some point about the foundation of the GAA, because while 7 people are said to have been in the room, other people claim 13, and other people claim many more than that. And of course, there's a confusion between the first meeting and the first annual convention, which happens a year later. And there's a whole load of mystique and nonsense written and spoken about this. But the point of it is, the GAA's starting point was to get athletics up and running, to get people playing football, and to get hurling spread. That was the whole thing that they were at. And through 1885, athletics really took off. Gaelic football began to prosper. And slowly but surely, hurling gathered momentum. And big games were played, like Easter Monday in Thurles. A huge crowd beginning to turn out to games. Teams from Tipperary play from Cork in a series of matches. Again, enormous interest. Into 1886, there's more and more tournaments being organised. A team of hurlers go up from East Galway to play in the Phoenix Park on a Tuesday against Tipperary, and another crowd are playing. They put on an exhibition, so that's another step forward. So more and more people are playing, but there's a couple of problems. There is no formal organisation of contests. It's individual contests between clubs, number one. Number two, there is no real incentive on a club that's formed to affiliate to the Central GAA, because why would you? Unless you absolutely have to give them money, why would you necessarily do it? And number three, it's not clear where the gates that are being collected are going. Let's play it. So the GAA then hits on the idea in November 1886 of starting an All Ireland Championship. And that's really, really important. I personally think it was inspired to do this by the FA Cup. It saw the success of the FA Cup in organising and driving the spread of soccer in England on its county basis. I think that's extremely, extremely important. I think it's also important because everybody talks about the importance of local competitions within local rivalries. But the frame that it gives the GAA is one of national competition when it forms a championship. And that also drove people into the organisation.
Love the free episodes of Over the Bar? Then take your passion further with the Cordia Club membership. For €5 a month, you'll unlock bonus series and member-only shows. Hear the podcast first and ad-free, and get behind-the-scenes access through detailed notes, a newsletter, and Q&As. It's the ultimate GAA history experience, curated by Michael Foley and Ciaran O'Hara just for you. Upgrade your listening, support the show. Join today at overthebar.club.
So it's an open draw, which is something, of course, that's talked about ad nauseum for about well, yeah, 140 years actually since. I know the glories of an open draw. The first round is Wicklow, and of course they're playing. Paul, am I right in saying it's the idea is you play your club championships and the club champion goes forward in to represent the county? Right?
Yes,
right. So we've got Wicklow versus Clare, Louth versus Waterford, Galway versus Wexford, Kilkenny versus Cork, nice tasty draw, even though no one knew it at the time. Meath versus Limerick, and Tip versus the Dubs. It's straight away and runs into... It almost feels like they've gone at this too soon. It's like they're so excited about how well everything has gone for 12 months. Like, Wicklow refused to travel to play the Clare champions, neither Louth nor Waterford, there hadn't been a hurley swung and angle.
There was no hurling.
No hurling at all. Kilkenny, Cork, Meath, Limerick. Galway, Wexford jumped out to me because it's frankly hilarious. Castlebridge
from Wexford, they won the football championship, but there had been no hurling championship played in Wexford. Wexford was brilliantly organised for football, had its own fields, put up a stand, which collapsed, by the way, and people sued them. But put their football championships into the champions into the hurling championship. Galway had played no football, even though there was hurling all over. Galway had organised no formal hurling championship, but nominated Mealich to represent them.
So Galway win well, 3-8 to a goal. And again, I suppose, in another echo of future GA history, you're looking at the rules and going, how can we kind of work around these? So at that point in hurling, the trip from behind is banned.
Yeah.
But Castlebridge notes that in the writing of the rule, tripping from the side and the front is not. So they go to town on that, apparently. A guy from Mealich, he loses his front teeth. Lord French, of Elm Park, where the game is played, he gives your man £2 to go and sort out his teeth. And of course, your man, what does he do? Your man goes and drinks it. Lord French gives another £3 to the Mealich team to go away and celebrate. And you know, there's a wonderful, and it's in the book, Paul, is a wonderful quote from the Western News that Castlebridge, the champion team of Wexford, which was hitherto considered invincible, which of course it's fairly easy to be invincible when you've never played a game of hurling before.
Invincible at football.
Tipperary ran a really good championship, really serious championship. To go to 20 teams entered. They got to the final and they got a winner for the championship. There was contests, there was disputes along the way, but broadly speaking, they got there. Similarly, Dublin championship was won by Metropolitans. But they declined to play in the summer because they thought hurling was a winter game and it was too hot to hurl in the summer. So that game is never played. Probably the most extraordinary one is Cork against Kilkenny. So Kilkenny was a football county. Almost 20 teams entered the football championship and only 4 entered the hurling. But it ends up with Tullaroan and Mooncoin, and Tullaroan go through. They're drawn to play Cork in Waterford on a Sunday. They get a train down, but the Cork Championship has ended in disarray, where 3 teams are all claiming to be in the championship, representing Cork, but on the day, 2 of them travel to Waterford, but nobody takes the field to play against Kilkenny. So there's a walkover there. And this happens, this type of thing happens. Louth had no hurling, Waterford had no hurling. Waterford people hate hearing this, but the truth of it is that they invited Kilkenny hurlers down to give an exhibition in the hope of spreading the game to their county during these years. So this goes on and on. By the way, it should be noted that an MP in Wexford talked about putting up a silver cup to encourage a hurling in what was called the weaker counties already in 1887. So this is going on. This is going on from the time. So you're left then with a series of matches where Clare ran a really serious championship, but they were beaten by Tipperary in a quarterfinal, semi-final, who had previously beaten Kilkenny, and Galway are through to the final as well. So you've got the Galway champions Mealich through to play the Tipperary champions, who were Thurles, in the final in Bar, picked for the obvious genius of Offaly's people, talent for organisation, and it's played there set for April 1888.
Love GEA history? Then you love going deeper with Over the Bar's Cordia Club membership. For just €5 a month, you'll get exclusive member-only episodes and series, early ad-free access to the main podcast, plus detailed show notes, a newsletter, and the chance to have your questions answered. Join Michael Foley and Ciaran O'Hara as they uncover the stories, the legends, and the questions that shaped our games. Don't just listen, be part of the club. Join now at overthebar.club.
And of course, then you have the field in Burr with its, its long-standing reputation as a fine field, given that the first game was played a week before. I wouldn't say, Paul, it was kind of cobbled together, but they weren't exactly bringing the match to a storied field, were they?
Oh no, it was cobbled together, 100% cobbled together. That's exactly what it is. But so were the 2 teams. So Mealich weren't, even though you were meant to be one club, one parish, and play only the people who were from the parish, Mealich had players from Killimer and Kiltormer and Bacon. There were various places around Mealich were packed out the Mealich team. And by the same token,
Mealich would later be the East Galway division.
Yeah, more or less. That's it. But Thurles did it too. So Thurles, on the morning of the game, players who had hurled for Thurles were left on the platform in Thurles because they looked for expenses. And the best hurlers who they played against earlier in the year from, we'll say, Horse and Jockey or from surrounding clubs were brought in to pack out the Thurles team. So if you ever see a photo of that team that went on and won the All Ireland, it was actually taken in 1910, included some players who didn't play in the final. They're all squeezed back into the jerseys and they all look like they're 50, which a lot of them are heading in that direction. And they still hadn't got their medals, by the way. The medals were only presented after 1913.
Yeah, that's incredible. I was actually going to ask you about like the trappings of an All Ireland final. I suppose that we might have some connection to now. Like, so there was, we know, as we mentioned before, there was no band. So was there kind of any pageantry around this at all, kind of compared to the stuff that would have attracted people to games previously? Like, so we know there was no music, but they marched to the match at the parade. But outside of that, it seems like it was a fairly kind of a dowdy affair, Paul, was it? Like was there even, like, did they have jerseys?
There were jerseys, yeah. They were both wearing green, which was quite interesting, as a clash of colours. So, but because, of course, it was patriotic in some of its shape or form. When the ball was thrown in, they reckon, when some news reports say 5,000, I think more realistically, there was a couple of thousand people there. There were hawkers on the sidelines selling apples and oranges. There were people gambling, throwing things. There was a whole lot of the Scottish Highland Regiment who were based in Crinkle on the edge of Burr. There's massive British Army barracks in Crinkle. They'd come in from that to watch the game. And it looks like there was drinking on the sideline as well. And the ball's thrown in between all 21 players from each team, lining the middle of the field. And there's just this explosion of timber around the place. And then it's an unmerciful slog for the next hour.
So Thurles or Tipperary eventually come out on top. It's a tough game, and it's probably worth actually mentioning John Lowry and John Mannion from Mealich at this point. Like, so John Mannion is in the goals, and if he, when he's asked years later about the game, he still has regrets over conceding the goal. But to be fair, he walked most of the way to Burr. He actually missed the carriage that was bringing the team over to Burr because there was some land agitation going on in the area. So two of them actually missed the carriage, John Mannion being one. And also, on top of that, poor John was wearing shorts for the first time, so they were digging into him as well, making him a bit uncomfortable in goal. So there was all sorts going on. John Lowry was the other guy who missed the carriage, and he walked most of the way, and he got actually sent off in the game for having a dig at the Tipperary players. It's not the last time that a Galway Tipperary game was I suppose blighted or whatever by a few digs between the players. But wild night in Burr afterwards then, Paul. But ultimately, was this whole thing considered a success? I mean, it was such chaos to get it to this point. The game itself and even the run into it is chaotic. But ultimately, are they happy with how it panned out?
So after the match, there's more than 20 people arrested for being drunk in Burr on the night, including a fella who was drunk in charge of an ass and cart.
And is it true, Paul, that some of the Mealich players may have been somewhat impeded before the game?
They arrived into Burr and word had come that Thurles team were coming. That there'd been a dispute, again true, but they were coming. They were just late and the train was late. They put down their bottles of beer before they met them and marched to the game. It's very much of the time what's happening here. Modern sport had yet to be regulated in the manner in which we know it now. All of the kind of the sportification of the game hadn't really been taking place. It was in the early stages, but it was an exceptional success. And the reason why it was an exceptional success is that it happened at all. Because it's from that moment that the All-Ireland champion begins a long, slow establishment of itself as the basic frame of competition within the GA. Because it happened in two ways. First of all, it was prototype for the county championship. So you had to be a club who won your county championship. So that we know in time became the thing. And second of all, as a contest between counties, it was really important because this is the time that gives the territorial base uniquely in modern sports to the GA. You play for where you're from. You play for your parish and then you play for your county.
And I think at some point we will be coming back to where do counties come from, and this certainly gives us the initial insight into why that structure works so well. Paul, it's been fascinating having you. The book, The Hurlers, is the definitive article on this period in hurling. So if you haven't read it, folks, go out, buy it now. It's a fantastic piece of work, and we're very grateful that you came to join us today, Paul, and give us just a flavour of the work that you put into that particular tome.
Well, thanks a million for having me.
Yeah, that was That was great stuff. I mean, you know, it's as you mentioned the book again at the end. It's kind of just a little insight into what all the stuff that's actually in the book, the wider story. But it's a magic story. And again, there's so much about the early days of the GA that still echoes back to now, the stuff that comes up, the issues and all the rest of it. So thanks to Paul again for all that. And Ciaran, I will hand it to you to give us a reminder of what's available to our much cherished and admired Corja Club members.
They are cherished and admired. And this week, the Corja Club exclusive is, given that we're on the subject of an All Ireland final, the first All Ireland final, which was played in Parsonstown, Kings County, now known as Burr County, Offaly. We have a great episode with Ciaran Murphy on All Ireland final venues. And there's some real interesting choices in there, is all that can be said. So if you are in the Corja Club, we hope you enjoy that. If you're not, come and join.
Please do. Please do. There's a lot there for you. That's going to be a great one. I tell you, what you want to do there now is write out a bingo card of places you think an All-Ireland final has been, and then be shocked at the places that you left out. Because Cian is great on this. Cian is in the GA press office, but he's a touch of an Indiana Jones character about this guy in terms of, you know, digging out history and GA history stories and stuff like this, an actual proper list of All Ireland final venues. So do come back for that. Like, review, share with anybody you think might enjoy this sort of stuff, these kind of yarns. Subscribe. You know, we're trying to do something here with independent storytelling, and you know, all of that support keeps us going. And yeah, do come back.
Feel free to, you know, drop some comments in the feeds there, whether you're a Corja Club member or you're listening somewhere else. Drop some comments in, drop some questions in. We'd love to get your feedback. But for now, Mick, I think it's time to shuffle off for another week. Yeah.
Go and recover, recuperate. And as we say, for our Corja Club members, we'll be back straight away talking All Ireland final venues. But for everybody else, we'll talk to you soon.